little over 2 weeks ago, I was asked to give the next 6 Friday khutbahs at this masjid. And so I said, okay, Bismillah, I'm going to do the best I can do. And I'm going to try to make it cumulative. I'm going to try and make it a theme. It's going to build upon itself. And the focal point is going to be, how can we live holistic, ethical lives here in Oakland, California, in the East Bay, in the year 2023, as we are embedded within these political and economic conditions, with the history that comes in this time and this place behind us, making sense out of it and being realistic about it and being comprehensive about it. So in the first week, I talked about the land that we walk upon and the history of this land. Last week, I talked about families and how we're all embedded in families, and that brings us our own unique ethical challenges. But today I have to shift. Today I have to shift my plans because the brother who would normally be sitting right there died unexpectedly on Sunday at the age of 53. Sayyid Abul Hassan Muqtabad, rahmatullahi alayh, may Allah have mercy on him.
Ameen.
And our sister is here fulfilling his role to record these khutbahs in his absence. He was just buried in Sacramento this morning. He died either of a massive stroke or heart attack. I'm not sure what the final result was. This is something that reminds us of the reality of each and every single one of our lives. Families are intergenerational. They consist of, grandfathers and grandmothers, and then there are the people in the present, and there's children yet to come and grandchildren yet to come. Land has a certain stability, and we talked in the first khutbah, the coastline during the last ice age, 10,000 years ago or more, used to be farther away, farther to the west, when the sea levels were lower. But, more or less, the land is as it has been for all of recorded human history, the last 5,000 years. If you were to walk around the San Francisco Bay Area, it would have been more or less the same topography. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, transcendent and exalted, created every single one of us as individuals. As much as we are part of larger structures, as much as we are part of larger communities, as much as we are part of larger phenomenon, every single one of us is a thought of God that Allah brought into being, because He's al-Khaliq, al-Bari, al-Musawwir, the creator, the originator, the fashioner, brought you out of the wombs of your mothers into this world, and so too one day will we return back from where we came from. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And so, although every time I've stood here since I moved to Oakland, Sayyid Abu Hassan Muqtabad was sitting right there, now he's not, by Allah's decree. And this is something that becomes fundamental to our experience of faith, fundamental to our experience of Islam, fundamental to our experience of listening to the call and responding to the message and the movement of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May peace and blessings be upon him and his family. And that's something that was exactly the same as what people 1400 years ago faced. When you read the Quran and you read it within its historical context, and for example, you understand the difference between the Mecki and the Medini verses, the verses that were revealed in the first 13 years of the Prophet's mission, before the Hijrah, before the migration to the city of Medina, and those other sets of verses that were revealed after, you see certain things that are very striking. In the Mecki verses, the verses related to the mission and the message of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was in his own hometown preaching Islam to the people, what are some of the things that he focused on? One of the most striking things that he focused on was belief in life after death and in resurrection. Sometimes there's this idea that the modern world is an age of skepticism, and that long ago people were gullible and people were foolish, and they all just believed that they were going to live after they would die. But that is not true. For as the Quran says that the people of that time, when the Prophet taught them that you were created by a Lord who created all of this, and just as you live now, so too will you die, and then you will be raised again and live a second time. They said, وَقَالُوا مَا هِيَ إِلَّا حَيَاتُنَا الدُّنْيَا نَمُوتُ وَنَحْيَا وَمَا يُحْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرُ وَمَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِنْ هُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. That the people would say, there's nothing but this worldly life. There's nothing but this material universe. We die and we live, and nothing destroys us except time, right? The universe is 14 billion years old, and so many things have come and gone. Just time and just random accidents of chemicals and physical principles. It has no meaning. Illa dahr. This movement and this change, this time that unfolds, that just destroys us. And then more beings will come after us. It has no purpose. Right? This is exactly how the people of 7th century Mecca thought, right? They weren't PhDs in philosophy. They weren't PhDs in evolutionary biology. They weren't tenured professors at Tufts University. These were people of the 7th century living in a pre-modern society. They had to travel in camels through the desert. They had to eke out their living in the desert. And they had the same type of skepticism. But the Quran responds to them. But they have no knowledge of what they're talking about. They're just speculating. And so what does the Quran do? The Quran says over and over again, look at the world that you find yourselves in. Look at the trees, look at the mountains, look at your own fingertips, as it says in one point in the Quran. Reflect on your own fingertips. I brought all of that into being. Everything that you are, everything that you've experienced is because I did that. And so why are you so confused? Why are you so skeptical? Why are you so doubtful that when Sayyid Abul Hassan Muqtabad went into the grave an hour ago in Sacramento, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not raise him up and recreate him again? Just as he brought him out of nothing, he will bring him back again. This was what the Prophet Muhammad himself, 1400 years ago, was saying over and over and over again to his people. And they were saying things like, as the verse of Quran says, إِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِ آيَاتُنَا قَالَ أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. So when we would tell them the stories of the people who went before them, they say, these are just old, foolish tales. These are just myths. You know, Musa, alayhi salam, the Prophet Moses, Ibrahim, alayhi salam, the Prophet Abraham. These are just myths, right? Again, they were not PhDs in history from Harvard University saying, oh, well, if you look at the Hebrew texts and the Aramaic texts and the Syriac texts and the Arabic texts, you can see that clearly over time, this myth was established. No, they were not like that. But they said the exact same thing as those people that spend their life trying to disprove the message of the prophets, alayhim salam. May peace be upon all of them, right? Why? Because if it's true, then you got something to do. If it's true, then you have to respond. If it's true, you have to be like Sayyid Abul Hassan Muqtabad in the front row every day, serving this masjid, serving this community with humility, making salah, right? He fulfilled his mission. He fulfilled his vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all of us here who are gathering to worship Allah in this moment are remembering him and missing him and wishing him the best on his further journey into the hereafter. Whereas some people, maybe some people even in his own family, I don't know his own family, wherever they may be around the world, don't think that that's possible. Don't think that that's true, right? Because everybody is free. Everybody is free to believe what they want to believe. You think that everybody who met the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. They wanted to kill the Prophet. They wanted to kill Imam Ali. They wanted to kill these people that were hujjah, These people that were proofs against them, against their selfishness, against their small-mindedness. They said, I'm a messenger from God, and you have to respond. Right? We know the famous story of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may peace and blessings be upon him and his family. He stands up at the beginning of his very public phase of the mission. He stands up on a mountain on the outskirts of Mecca, and he calls out to his people, and he says, oh people, if I were to tell you that there was an army on the other side of this mountain, and they were coming to attack you, what would you do? We'd say, you're truthful, you're trustworthy, we believe you, right? In matters of most and grave and utmost importance in this dunya, you're going to die, your property is going to be destroyed, you're going to have to run away and flee, maybe your own children will be killed. If that was what you were saying was about to happen, we would believe you. So he says, I am a messenger from the Lord of the worlds, and I am telling you that you have to believe in La ilaha illallah, that there's no God but God. You need to get rid of Lat and Uzza and all these things that you've invented. You need to stop burying your baby daughters alive. You need to give in charity, right? Because he wasn't asking the people even to pray at this point, or fast the month of Ramadan, right? Just believe in God. Be a good person. Prepare for your death. And you know what the story says? One of his own family members says, may you perish. That's how he responded. He said, right after saying, I would accept your testimony in the most gravest of matters of worldly affairs, now you're telling me some fairy tale that there's a God who created the whole universe and I'm going to die and I'm going to be resurrected. As it says at the end of Surah Yasin, that someone in the tafsir, someone came to him and they crushed a bone in front of him and blew the dust and said, when I'm like that, what's going to happen? He said, the one who made those bones will make you again. It was straightforward. It was naturalistic. It was real. He said, the Quran says, we will recreate your fingertips. We will recreate your bones. Listen, hey, Mr. High and Mighty human being, you were a drop of sperm that came out of your father. So where does this come from? It literally says that in the Quran. I can't say like the way from the minbar of the Prophet. I cannot say the kind of idiomatic way we would say it in English. But that's what it says. You were literally a drop of sperm that came out of your father. And now look at you. Look at you. You're a professional athlete. MashaAllah. You're a PhD in physics. MashaAllah. You're the CEO of a corporation. MashaAllah. You're the president of a country. MashaAllah. Okay, great. Now, Sayyid Abu Hassan, I knew him as the brother who was always here serving the masjid. I knew him as the sweet and gentle man. There was a language barrier between me and him because he spoke predominantly Farsi and I speak English and I don't know Farsi. And we had these little conversations and he was always wonderful, always sweet. He's the man who when people wouldn't show up, and we had to wait a few more minutes to start the Jummah, would make extra prayers. The man who had an absolutely beautiful adhan, mashallah. The man who was just a pleasant and wonderful person. I cannot think of a single element of my interactions with him over the last 4.5 years that are not sweet, right? They're all sweet, all of those memories. Yet little did I know that this man who was serving the masjid in a place where he could barely speak the language, this man was actually a prominent individual. He'd written multiple books in Farsi. He was a journalist. The BBC mentioned his passing. The former president of Iran, Sayyid Sheikh Mohammed Khatami, a well-respected intellectual and political leader around the world, wrote a letter publicly to his brother in Iran, and I had my friend, Dr. Masood Muvahid, trace it down and translate it for me. He said, in the name of God, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Dear Mr. Abdul Hussein Muqtaba, this is his brother, I am deeply saddened to hear the loss of your brother, who was an esteemed musicologist and journalist. I express my heartfelt solidarity to you and your family for this immense loss. May he be granted the best of places in the hereafter. Warmly, Sayyid Muhammad Khatami. Am I going to be honored that way when I die by a person of distinction, a person of nobility? I have no idea. But our brother here, who was humbly serving the masjid, I had no idea for 4.5 years, that he had this kind of background, and he had this kind of skills, and he had these kind of accomplishments. Did that lead him to be arrogant? Did that lead him to say, I am a man of distinction, I'm a man of culture, I'm a man of civilization. Why should I go to the masjid? Isn't that something that poor people do? Isn't that something that the riffraff do? Isn't that something that people who aren't educated do? I've written 3 books, right? He never mentioned these things. He just came here to worship his Lord. He came here to serve the community. Think about it. Think about some prominent individuals, a prominent intellectual in American society. I don't know, someone who has published with, HarperCollins. He's a journalist, and he's made a big impact in American society. He's someone they give an honorarium to when they want him to lecture at their university or something like that. And this guy, he decides, what? I'm going to go to Iran, and I'm going to go and I'm going to just videotape the Friday prayer in Shiraz. It's a masjid, and I don't even know Farsi. And I'm just going to go and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to videotape the Friday khutbah as my service to the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We cannot imagine it, right? We can't imagine that level of humility. And yet our brother was exemplifying that humble service to this community for 4.5 years, and probably much longer before I even showed up. Right? And so he's a living example to all of us, right? That no matter who you are and what station in life you are in, you can turn to Allah and you can find ways of serving Allah. You can, even if you find yourself in a different country where the language is difficult for you, you can continue to serve Allah, right? Because it's not about us being proud of our accomplishments. It's about us being grateful for the abilities and the possibilities that Allah has opened up before us so that we can become people of accomplishment, right? If you're someone, the beautiful thing about this deen is that it has a place for everybody. It has a place for the people of culture and civilization and intellectual life and so on and so forth. And at the same time, it has a place for people that never learn to read. And they can follow in the way of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is unlettered, right? They can be people. This religion encompasses people who spend their whole life filled in rooms from top to bottom with books upon books upon books. And there's people that spend their whole lives with their hands dirty in the fields. And every single one of them was created by Allah. And every single one of them has their place. And every single one of them has opportunities to serve their Lord with humility. And our brother Sayyid Abu Hassan Muqtabad reminds us of that. Our Lord has reminded us that we were dead once, and that we live now, we will die a second time, and we will come to life thereafter. As it says in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قالوا ربنا أمتنا اثنتين وأحييتنا اثنتين فاعترفنا بذنوبنا فهل إلى خروج من سبيل. These people will say, this is in the hereafter, our Lord, you caused us to die twice, and you gave us life twice, and now we are owning up to our sins. So is there a way out? Is there a way out? This is the way out. This moment, right now, for every single one of us who's gathered here, anyone who's watching now or in the future, this is the way out. This is the whole reason that we come here. This is the whole reason that Sayyid Abu Hassan Muqtabad, our brother, rahmatullahi alayhi, may Allah have mercy on him, was serving the community, right? That Allah has given us these bodies, He's given us wealth, He's given us intellect, He's given us something, and we can do something and return it back to Allah with gratitude. The wealthy person reaches into their pocket and realizes what they hold in their hand does not belong to them, but actually belongs to Allah. But Allah is so generous. Allah is so generous. He doesn't say something like, you got to give 50% of your wealth to the masjid. No. 2.5%, remember in the classic rulings of zakat, 2.5% of your savings over the course of a lunar year. You know how little that is compared to American taxes? The American government demands more of you than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does in terms of giving your money, right? And he doesn't say, you have to become a monk, and you have to go off and live in a monastery, and you can never have sex. No, he says, have a family, wake up for Fajr, pray Dhuhr and Asr, pray Maghrib and Isha. You know how long it takes to pray those 5 prayers, those 5 fundamental prayers? About 25 minutes out of your 24 hours, right? And you add into the making wudu and finding a place to pray, so if you're really all over the place, maybe 40 minutes, of having to just find the place to pray and all those sorts of things. So the point is that Allah's not asking that much, right? Why? Because Allah doesn't need it. Because Allah is Al-Kareem Al-Wahhab. Right? He gave us our hands, He gave us our eyes, He gave us our ears, He gave us our brains, He gave us our hearts. He's kept us alive, He's kept us safe. He's allowed us opportunities for education, He's allowed us opportunities to grow. We're still alive. Every single one of us. If you think your life is hard, at least take the moment to recognize the fact that our brother is gone. Our brother who was here every day sitting right there is not here today because he's in the ground. Right? So Allah has given you today in a way that there's no words, there's no way that we can show gratitude. There's no way that we can show gratitude for today to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Was it said in a narration about the Prophet Musa turned to Allah and he said, how can I thank you? You literally made this world, and you made me, and then everything I've ever done, everything I've ever experienced, everything I've ever seen, tasted, heard, smelled, touched, it's from you. How can I thank you for that? And Allah says, that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. I wanted you to recognize reality. And I wanted you, who are this creation that can rise to such heights, that from that shukr, from that gratitude, you can grow into something beautiful and amazing, like the prophets, alayhim salam, like people like Imam Ali, like Imam Hussein, people that were free. They were the ahrar. They were the truly free ones in this dunya. The son of Imam Hussein, Zain al-Abidin, surrounded his whole life by a political system that killed his own family members in the name of the religion of his own great-grandfather. Did he give despair? Did he despair that Allah is not real? How could this religion be real if this religion caused the political system to kill the whole family of the Prophet? And now I'm left here decade after decade. Did he despair? No. He did what he could, and he left us beautiful du'as like Sahifa Sajadiyah. He left us an enormous example of piety and of dignity and nobility, even in the face of the worst sort of oppression, right? And not just the worst sort of oppression, but the worst sort of oppression in the name of Islam, the twisting of Islam. And he didn't give up his hope in Allah and his messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So if Imam Zain al-Abidin can undergo that kind of experience, undergo that kind of tribulation, where his uncle and his brothers and his cousins were all slaughtered by the caliphal armies, right? And then still have such fervent belief and hope and trust, then we have no excuse. And that's why he's Imam Zain al-Abidin. And so what we learn to a certain extent from this experience is this fundamental teaching of our faith, which is that we live between fear and hope. Right? We have moments of hope where we think of the mercy of Allah and we cannot even believe that what He has promised is true. It's just too unbelievable and amazing to actually fathom. And our heart just soars at this promise, the wa'd, the promise of Allah, that He will resurrect us and He will give us that which no eye has ever seen, that which no ear has ever heard, and that which hasn't even been imagined by any human heart and mind. But we also have moments of fear when we recognize that if this is truly real, if Allah is real, He's Al-Jabbar, He's the mighty and overwhelming, Al-Aziz, Al-Qahar, right? And I'm just a speck in history. I'm just a speck on one planet in this vast universe, trillions of light years across and billions of years old. I'm nothing. And He can do with me as He pleases. And the fear is so overwhelming that it almost wants to break my bones inside my own body. So I alternate throughout life between this hope and fear, but because Allah is Arhamar Rahimeen, the most merciful of those who show mercy, the one who created, as one hadith says, 100 parts of mercy, and took out of all those 100 parts of mercy that He created from His eternal mercy, He sent one of those 100 parts down to this earth, and that's how a mother shows love for her child. That's how lovers entwine. That's how people are kind to each other and compassionate, and kept the other 99 parts of mercy in heaven for those whom He wills. If that is true, and Allah is Arhamar Rahimeen, then there's nothing that we can do that can hold us back from the mercy of Allah, if that's what we want. If we are just willing to turn towards Allah, if we are just willing to serve Allah, if we are just willing to open our hearts to love Allah and be loved in return, because Allah is Al-Wadud, love itself. If that's all true, then at the end of our lives, when faced with tribulations, we just leave aside the fear and go for the hope. Right? Right now, that's what we feel. Our brother, his life is over. His story is over. His journey is over. And so all of our hearts are united in just wishing mercy upon mercy upon mercy on him. And that there be sakina sent down upon his family, there be tranquility sent down upon his family, so that in his absence, they will find their way on their journey, and they will not despair. But they will realize that Allah is Arhamar Rahimeen, the most merciful of those who show mercy. And this ayah of mercy, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ اسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Say, O Prophet Muhammad, to humanity, O my servants, like you're saying in Allah's voice, O my servants, those who have been extravagant against their own souls, do not despair of the mercy of Allah, for surely Allah forgives every single sin. And Allah is the forgiving and the merciful Redeemer. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa
Salawat.
وصلى الله على محمد وآله وسلم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. صدق الله العظيم العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. The context that we are living in, though, is also real. As I said at the beginning of the khutbah, we're talking about talking about these big things, but we had to shift today to recognize the passing of our brother and to reflect on what it means for us. And that is that we live in the United States of America. We're in the United States of America at this moment. And what that means is that we are free to follow this way or to not follow this way. This is something that is often somehow just not addressed plainly. There are many people that enter this community, like me. When I was 16 years old, if you said, who's Muhammad? I'd probably been like, Muhammad Ali? You know, the boxer? Right? And then there are people that were born into this religion and they heard Quran, Muhammad, Allah over and over again for years and years and years, and now they don't even believe in God. Right? And you can do that. Every single one of you can go out here and go get a beer right now if you want. You can go buy weed. You live in California. You can do what you want. You don't have to be here. We're here because we believe that Allah is true. We're here because we believe that the messenger is true. We're here because we believe that the garden is true. We're here because we believe that the fire is true. And we're here because we believe that we will live again after we die. And if we aren't real with that, if we don't focus on that, then Islam will never make a lot of sense to us. Why put yourself through this? Why fast the month of Ramadan? Just do like a juice cleanse or something. Why pray and stand and bow? Just do yoga. Why give up alcohol because God said so? Just, I don't know, become a vegan. You know? If you want discipline, you don't need to have discipline from Allah and His Messenger. You can find other ways of getting discipline. If you want morals, you don't need Allah and His Messenger. You can be a Christian, you can be a Jew, you can be a follower of Peter Singer, the famous moral philosopher. Right? But we're here because we believe in La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. In a country that tried to outlaw the drinking of alcohol and absolutely failed. Right? And yet, so many people that I know adopted Islam and gave up drugs and gave up alcohol voluntarily. Why? Because they believed in the story of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam so many years ago in such a faraway place. These 3 verses of Quran that came down, talking about the drinking of alcohol and then eventually, finally prohibiting it, and the companions of the Prophet submitting to that decree from on high and smashing their wine jugs and the streets filling up with all the alcohol that they were pouring out. I mean, literally the same vignette, the same image as Eliot Ness in the 1920s going around and smashing Al Capone's liquor stashes in American history. If you've never watched any of these movies about the Prohibition era, maybe you should to understand that metaphor. But the point is that it's the same story. In the case of the United States of America, they tried to legislate it from on high, and the people rebelled against it. In the case of Islam, the faith was inculcated in people's hearts, so much so that when finally the revelation came down that you can't do this anymore, people said, Sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. Right? And it's not always easy to do that. My son came to me and he said, Abba, why do people kill the prophets? And I said, because if they're true, then that means they have to change how they're living. And they don't want to do that. It's as simple as that. Same story. Millennium after millennium, century after century. It's nothing new, right? And our brother, Sayyid Abu Hassan Muqtabad, reminds us that each of us have a choice of whether to be in the masjid or not. Not to say that you have to come to the masjid to be a good Muslim all the time. Point is not to say you got to come here even. Point is to say that the masjid represents the authority of Allah, the presence of Allah, the existence of Allah, the mercy of Allah. And we come here because we're looking for that. Just as we're looking for it in our own homes, just as we're looking for it in our workplaces, just as we're looking for it in our relationships with other people. And so I want to close with one of my favorite ahadith, one of my favorite narrations from our tradition, which to me is sort of sufficient. I mean, every time I read this hadith, I'm like, it's really, that's all it's about, right? It's not about loss. It's about eternal possibility. It's about all the hope and the joy and the freedom and the love and the possibility and the travel and the relationships that Allah has made possible on this earth can continue in places that we can't even imagine. Our heaven is a place of love, it's a place of pleasure, it's a place of beauty, it's a place of company, it's a place of solidarity, it's a place of infinite possibility. It's not a sad place. It's not a lonely place. I mean, if you want your heaven to be a huge library where you just sit in every day after, reading about ancient Egyptian history, if that's what your idea of heaven is, I'm sure Allah will facilitate that. But the point is, most of us want to enjoy a great time with our friends and our family and our loved ones and infinite possibilities, travel, experience. And so Allah speaks to us in those words and those sort of ways in the Quran. But this narration is found in the collection of Ibn Majah, related from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him and his family. On the day of resurrection, the disbeliever who lived the most luxurious life will be brought, and it will be said, dip him once into the fire. So he will be dipped into it, and it will be said to him, oh so-and-so, have you ever enjoyed any pleasure? He will respond, no, I have never enjoyed any pleasure. Then the believer who suffered the most hardship and trouble will be brought, and it will be said, dip him once in the garden. So he will be dipped into it, and it will be said to him, "Oh, so-and-so, have you ever suffered any hardship or trouble?" And he will say, "I have never suffered any hardship or trouble." So Ya Allah, the one who has called us to this place and this time and in this day, the one who has called us to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, Ya Allah, we ask that you dip our brother Sayyid Abu Hassan Mukhtabad into Jannah.
Ameen.
And that any sorrow that he ever had in this world, any sadness that came to his wife or his daughter or any of his family members or his friends is erased in that moment, Ya Allah, for all of them, Ya Allah.